here's what you're risking if you cut your training. These are the lawsuits you can face. And they're going to cost you a lot more, not just in money, but also in your political capital, your social capital with your community. And so our city has said, no, we're not cutting your training budget.
Pretty exciting. Chief, thank you for coming today. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you. You are presiding over one of the fastest growing cities in the Treasure Valley, right? Like Meridian. I remember when I moved here, people were talking about the difference between Eagle and Meridian. And one of the things that my friend said, he's like, listen, Eagle last year, they passed something like, they gave out 300-ish building permits. And I was like, okay, like I don't really know what that means, but okay, fine. Like Meridian did 300 last month. And you realize quickly, like this is a community that is changing and adapting almost on like a daily basis. I can't imagine enforcing laws in an effective, community safe manner has been easy.
It's a challenge. But I think one of the things that we've done in Meridian for a long, long time is make sure that we have that relationship with our community, and they have their expectations of what law enforcement should look like. And we've been able to continue to uphold that. We're very fortunate. We live in a very safe community, and a community that has been very supportive of law enforcement. But one of the things that we make sure is every new officer that comes in, we explain to them our mission, vision, culture, and values, and just how important that relationship between the community and our police department really is, and how easily you can lose that if you do the wrong thing.
Is that something you worry about? Because, I mean, like you have a lot of people coming in from out of state, and a lot of, I can speak for myself. One of the reasons we moved here is because it is safe, because it's a great school district, great community, culture is wonderful. And I worry, it's like, God, I really don't want this to turn into, where I came from. And it's something that I know a lot of people moving here are worried about. But you, as someone who's been here forever, like, is it something that you worry about?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just the people that are moving here to live in our community, but even some of the law enforcement people that we have coming in and coming to work for our organizations. We want to make sure they understand what our expectations are, what our culture of policing is. And the things that we do as an organization are very, very intentional. The reason that we have such high interaction with the community is because we know it's not just a partnership. I think Sir Robert Peel said it best, right? The community is the police, and the police are the community. And that is really true. And a lot of times, whenever I have an opportunity to talk to groups, I remind them of that when you see something that happens in California, when you see something that happens in another part of the country, we get painted with that broad brush. Don't do that. Base your perceptions on your interactions with us. And on top of that, we tell our officers, be curious. When you stop somebody on a traffic stop, their perception of what is occurring is completely different than our perception as a police officer. Explain to them why you're stopping them. Don't play the gotcha game. And if you start to see that conflict right away, ask them why. We're too quick to tell people, this is how we do things here. Sometimes we need to ask them, how did things work where you came from? How were your interactions with police where you came from? And take a look at their perception, and then be able to understand them better and have those conversations with them to show them, no, we're different than what you've had, the experience that you've had prior.
I've heard a lot about the distinction in culture and policies and, struggles and successes that the departments, police departments and law enforcement departments, agencies in this area are kind of combating compared to what happened before. For instance, it's my understanding that there's like a culture shock when out-of-state law enforcement people come here and they attempt to gain employment. Again, as a law enforcement officer, there's just a difference there. I've heard this from people who, like yourself, who've been here for a long time and are experiencing people coming in. And I've also heard it from people coming in. I know lots of law enforcement agents from like Oakland and those surrounding areas. What are those differences? Like, what do you see as the cultural shift that they're going to have to embrace to be effective in this area?
I think really the thing that we focused on in this state from the beginning, and that is we're very accepting of people. As long as what you're doing isn't affecting me, you be you. You do your thing, and we're going to be okay, right? As you're not breaking the law, you're not doing those things, we're all going to be fine. There's a big umbrella here. But I think what happens oftentimes is they come up in an agency that, for whatever reason, historically, probably before they got there, has this rift between their community or certain segments of their community. And nobody really trusts one another and wants to build that bridge. And so what we try to do from the very beginning is keep a hold of that trust between us and the different people that are moving here, right? The different, the underserved communities and those types of things. Again, be curious about people. Understand why they do the things that they do, why they behave the way that they behave, and realize they're people. They're people. One of the things I tell our officers is this: you're going to treat everybody you come into contact with dignity and respect. I don't care if it's a bad guy. You're going to speak to them politely. You're not going to scream at them. You're not going to swear at them. You're not going to berate them. There will come a time when we may have to use force against somebody, and we will use force. We will come out on top in that conflict. We will do it professionally. And when they're done resisting, we're done using force. And we're going to dust them off and treat them like the human being that they deserve to be treated like. And we have to remind ourselves of that. On the flip side of that, we also have to remember that police officers are human as well. And that's one of the talks, when I talk to community members, I remind them of that. Remember, that police officer that you're criticizing, that you don't really know, or that you're generalizing about police, realize that they're probably your kid's soccer coach on the weekends. They're probably your kid's martial arts instructor. They're interacting with your children. They're your Sunday school teacher. They're just like you. We just put on a different uniform when we go to work. We're all human beings. There's human error in law enforcement. We've got to realize that. I think everybody expects a police officer when they show up to the scene and it's highly volatile, they expect you to be perfect. We don't expect anybody to be perfect. People die on the operating table every day. I don't see us going to a surgeon and going, well, someone died on your operating table. You're going to be off for 3 days. We're going to investigate you criminally, and we just expect you to be fine. So we have to realize there's human error involved in everything we do.
I recently spoke with John Mattingly, one of the Louisville Metro police officers that was involved in the Breonna Taylor incident. And, as just an uninformed civilian walking around, when I heard the initial conversation, I didn't really dig into it. And again, there's been such an undercurrent of, or not even an undercurrent, just like a massive wave of civil unrest and criticism and, damn the police for years now, that again, as the narrative came through, it's like, oh, the police screwed up this and it's like, I don't want to hear this anymore. Like, and again, I have family that's in the armed services and law enforcement. It's like, I just don't buy that. So I didn't even investigate, right? Do my own research, but I did have an opportunity to do a podcast with him. And it was unbelievable to hear the way that this officer was treated, not just by the public, but by the department, right? It's not just that the public sentiment was like LeBron James is tweeting and talking about how they killed Breonna Taylor in cold blood murder. They went into the wrong house, blah, blah, blah. Not only was that all not true, but the department treated him and his coworkers, the other responding officers, as if it were true. Point in case, he found out, first off, in the night of the incident, he got shot, femoral artery, almost bled out on the scene. So here this guy almost dies in the actual night. They were at the right house, going after the right person that was indeed involved with drugs, like very sincerely involved in the drug trade. He gets shot, almost dies, narrative shifts. He realizes his life and his family life are legitimately at risk. So the FBI apparently reaches out and they say, all right, look, there's a credible threat against your life. There's a biker gang Breonna Taylor's mom's involved in. Her birthday's coming up. They've taken out a hit. And their response to knowing this was informing John Mattingly that this was real, and they were not going to elect to prosecute or pursue it because the optics would be bad. And I heard that, and I didn't even know what to say, because I mean, obviously, again, you want to apologize, you want to scream, like you feel so helpless. Here I'm looking at this guy who's been through all of this horrible stuff. And the flip side of that is what services are at his disposal to handle all of this? First off, he's no longer a police officer, right? So he lost his career. He had been in it for almost 2 decades. This is all he did, right? So no longer is he able to do that. And where is the assistance for these officers? You talk about, hey, just so you know, this guy's coaching your kids. This guy's doing this. This could be a youth group leader, could be anything. But what services do you guys offer? Like, how is Meridian keeping up with the mental toll of enforcing the law and helping the officers feel guided appropriately, but also supported? So it's like, look, this is a dirty business we're in, but you still have to go home and you still have to be the youth group leader. You still have to coach. And we want you to be doing these things effectively, successfully, happily, and thriving. Like, how does Meridian support its officers so that's a reality?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different aspects to that. I'll try to parse them down.
Take your time.
Well, one of the things certainly that we look at is certain incidents. We usually call them critical incidents, right, where an officer is involved in a shooting or somebody dies in police custody. And our officers are automatically given 3 days off, mandatory. They are sent to counseling. If they need more time off, they're given more time off. We also do what is called we have a peer support group within the agency that have gone through specialized training and so that they can counsel as well with our officers. We do what's called a critical incident stress management debrief.
CISM.
Yeah, CISM, where we bring everybody in the room. And we don't just bring our officers in the room. If fire was involved in that call, we invite them. If obviously dispatch is involved, we invite the dispatchers. We invite our records people, because what we found is we kind of forget about your records people who are having to read these reports, who are watching these videos and doing these things for public records requests and things, and it affects them. So we bring them all in the room and we have those discussions and we offer that the counseling and those types of things. The other thing, and this will tick off some of the old school guys, because I always told way back when, don't tell your wife anything you do. Don't tell them. Don't, you keep all that inside, suck it up, go back to work. I absolutely disagree with that. I tell my wife everything about my job and have for a long, long time, because she has to know why I'm acting the way I'm acting, or why I'm withdrawn, and because she's part of this, right? Our spouses are the ones who really get us through our careers, and we've got to be able to have those conversations with them. You don't have to give them the gory details, but you need to explain to them what you went through on your shift so they understand why you don't want to interact for an hour after you get home, or you want to go decompress or do whatever, and hopefully in a healthy way. But talk to your spouse. One of the other things I also tell our brand new officers is make sure you keep your old friends. Cops can be really negative, and it seems to be easier to focus on the negatives of this job. So keep your old friends, because they will ground you. When you think that the world is against you and everybody hates the police, when you bring that up to your friends who are out in the community and have a completely different view than you'll realize when they tell you, no, that's not true. All the people that I work with, or the people, my friends, the people at my church, they support law enforcement. They support what you're doing. And you've got to be grounded in that, and you've got to be able to realize that and remind yourself of that. We are very good at focusing on the negative calls we go to. And I try to remind our officers, what about the baby who you gave CPR to that you saved? What about the person that you used a tourniquet on and you saved their life? What about the lady you got out of a domestic violence relationship and now she's flourishing? Or the person that you had an arrest on for DUI or drugs or whatever, and that interaction was the one that turned them, and they were able to now go on and be successful people. Those are the things we should be focusing on. Those are the things that really, as law enforcement, that's what we should be talking about at when we're having adult beverages and talking and having choir practice. Let's talk about those positive interactions we had at the job. We can talk about the negative stuff for sure, but every day you wake up, you need to be going to work focused on the positive. Just my belief. It's something I tell my son and have for a long time. When he would wake up and he's like, "Oh, I have to go to school. Oh, I have to do." I said, "No, you get to go to school. You need to realize that there is a family somewhere whose 15, 16, however year old child didn't wake up today. And that child wanted to wake up and be able to go to school, but they didn't. And there's a family that has to live with that as well. So realize the gift that you've been given, I guess, is kind of a way to look at that."
Oh, yeah. I mean, that hits, that's overwhelmingly true. I mean, just the fact that we're, 6 feet above ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the greatest country in the world.
Right. There's something you said 10 minutes ago about the culture of policing here is kind of like, look, you're not breaking the law. I'm not breaking the law. Let's not do this with each other. There's no need. There are state policies that are so different here than the surrounding areas. And marijuana seems to be one of the biggest. Now, when marijuana got legalized in California, there was not a very good explanation about why that was a bad idea, because the easy objections to the opponents would be like, okay, how many people have ever overdosed from marijuana? And it's like, okay, well, you're not going to come up with anybody, right? They're not talking about people having schizophrenic breaks, by the way. They just said how many people overdosed and died. Okay, well, 0, fine. And then it was like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? You get really stoned and you murder a bag of Doritos. Like, okay. So there are all these like really flippant kind of dismissive objections to the policy. But as time went on and I got older and I had, I'm not like a big marijuana person, right? But as the objections changed, and I listened to more and more people, there were law enforcement officers that were getting better at articulating the problem with marijuana. Mm-hmm. And one in particular recently told me, he said, look, the problem is not marijuana itself, right? He's like, yeah, look, fine. Nobody goes, or not nobody, because people do go crazy from smoking marijuana. He said, look, let's make the gross assumption that it is related to fewer, the actual drug and the consumption of the drug itself is related to fewer overdoses and violent crimes itself. Like if you took it siloed, right? I'm like, okay, that seems reasonable compared to, let's say, alcohol, right? He said, the problem is not necessarily that. The problem is everything that comes along with that. And he said, for instance, this individual happened to be a former law enforcement officer. He said, look, we had people prior to the legalization that we knew were selling on the street corners and whatnot. And if we caught them, we'd pick them up, we'd process them. That's when the DAs would still process people and we still had room in the jails, because after a little while, the DA stopped prosecuting, and after a little while, the jails were too full. So it wasn't just the marijuana, peddlers. It was like the violent criminals that were getting let out a week after being in there. But he said, look, let's make the assumption that the pot was fine. The problem is the people that were selling it and the systems that they were plugged into. Once it became legal, they got emboldened to not only sell that, because there are legal dispensaries, but they could just sell it illegally a lot cheaper. And what are the odds you're going to go away for hard time if you're selling something that is legal to have, but it's not legal to sell? It's like, you're not going to do a lot of time for that. So priorities and space in jail and prosecutors, we stopped going after them, even though they knew they were selling it illegally, because the product itself wasn't illegal. Then they realized that we were no longer going after them. So they stopped selling just marijuana and they started selling harder drugs like cocaine or meth all kinds of things. It became a broader problem. So you move here, people move here, and they're like, oh, marijuana is illegal here. And it's not, I haven't heard it explained that well yet. Is that a perspective? First off, do you think I'm on the right track with why it's good to stay illegal? Just start there.
Yeah, I can tell you, I'll get excited about this. And I tick some people off because I'm a big anti-marijuana person in our state for a whole variety of reasons. And,
Sure.
and one of the things everybody always brought up was, oh, we're going to get all this tax money from marijuana. Life's going to be great. And my argument has always been the societal cost. Your taxes are never going to catch up to the societal cost. Look, take alcohol, for instance, and I'm no teetotaler. But the cost to society caused by drunk driving, caused by alcoholism, far outweighs the taxes we bring in from our alcohol sales.
Oh, yeah.
Marijuana is no different. So now we've just added one more thing to throw out there to ruin families, to ruin lives, ruin marriages, ruin your opportunities at a successful job, life. So you take all of those things, you put those in there. Now, you take marijuana and you take a look at what it did to California. You take and you look at what has happened in Colorado, what is going on in Oregon, what is going on in Washington, and tell me how successful this experiment was. And my other argument to that was we are taking a generation of kids and we're doing a social experiment on them. And what are we going to do as we start to see these rises in mental health issues from chronic marijuana users? What are we going to do when we realize this social experiment has failed? We never get that genie back in the bottle. And then you brought it up. They're selling marijuana for cheaper because the taxes are so high in these other states. They can sell it for cheaper.
Right. So then you miss out on your tax revenue that you thought was justifying this entire thing.
And the argument in Oregon was, oh, marijuana legalization, less people will be using opioids if we're letting them smoke marijuana. And it proved to be completely false. And so now what are we dealing with? We are dealing with a state, Oregon, that has said, well, we're not even going to prosecute you if you have methamphetamine on you. As long as it's not a large amount, it's a small amount. We'll write you a ticket that says you can accept going to drug court or drug counseling in lieu of the ticket. Well, no one's doing that there. And it's a huge failure. I literally talked to a judge today, retired judge out of Oregon, moved to Idaho because of what a failure their policies have been in their judicial system over there for all the things that you talked about as well.
It's the youth using chronic use is like, I think everybody who's ever had tequila can remember the bad tequila night, right? Like, I don't mean to be crass, but like anybody who's ever had, it's like, oh, I can never Don Jose or like whatever. It's like, oh, they just can't even smell it, right? Because you have such a visceral negative feedback loop to drinking, right? So like you drink, like if I had a Christmas party last night and I had like a little tiny gin and tonic because I just can't. I very much like gin. Like it's not bad at all. But for me, like I get up at 5:15 and go train jiu-jitsu. Like I can't drink a gin and tonic and be up at 5:15 to go like choke a gorilla or be choked by a gorilla. Yeah. Like it just doesn't work, right? So for me, the negative feedback is so significant even at this age that it's like, hey, look, I self-regulate, right? That's not a problem. But with marijuana, you don't have that negative feedback loop in the same way. Like you don't wake up the next day, like, oh, like if you eat let's say I go to bed and I eat like a pot brownie or something right before bed, or like I grab a bong from somewhere and whatever. Anyway, the point is I could get obliterated, go to bed, I will wake up and I'm not going to wake up feeling like death. Like I might wake up feeling a little foggy, but you don't have the same kind of feedback that would drive like, the 21-year-old who had too much tequila to never drink tequila again. You're not going to get that same feedback for marijuana use, right? You might be a little bit more apathetic. You might care a little bit less. You might be a little crankier. And then all of a sudden you're doing it more and you're doing it more and you're doing it more, which leads to a downward spiral. That's the feedback loop, which is you get less done. You're less productive. You care less about things. And then you smoke more because you just don't care. And all the way down.
Yeah, I think I think that you described it pretty well. And that's the other thing. When people compare alcohol to marijuana and this, you know, alcohol dissipates out of your system right within hours. The one thing about marijuana is, and it's been proven. I was a drug recognition expert coming up through the ranks, and that impairment can last almost 24 hours after usage. So you have someone who's smoking the night before, and they're getting on, they're driving your kids to school in the school bus, right? And they're still impaired, and those are the things that everybody wants to try to poo-poo away. This idea of sneaking it in through medical marijuana is so ridiculous. You tell me another medicine where the doctor says, "Oh, smoke it; it'll make you better." We make up these excuses so we quit having to have the argument. And what is worrisome to me is we see some politicians in our state making the same arguments and decisions when it comes to drugs, but they've based it on a different reasoning than they have in these other states, right? It's in the name of freedom. And they think that, well, if we do all these things in the name of freedom, there's going to be a different outcome. No, the outcome is going to be the same. It doesn't matter what your intentions were behind it. The outcome will be the same. And we need to realize that. And we need to be willing to stand up as a state and say, no, we're going to be that holdout state. We're going to keep doing things the way that we've been doing them here. There is a reason people are coming here. And it's really frustrating when they get here. And I've seen some come here and they're like, I can't believe marijuana is not legal here. Well, how do you think things are so safe here? I had someone talk to me and they said, we noticed that your agency is putting people in jail for possession of marijuana. I said, yeah. Well, it's very concerning to some of the people I talk to, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, now hold on. Why do you like living in Meridian, Idaho? Oh, because there's no graffiti, the crime rate's low, there's all blah, and they give me the laundry list of things. And I says, you want to know why? Because we're still taking care of those little things. We don't arrest everybody that we come in contact with for simple possession of marijuana. But our officers know if they've had repeat contacts with these people. Our officers know through their interactions whether someone actually needs to go to jail or whether they need to get a citation. We've uncovered large-scale drug trafficking organizations based off of somebody smoking marijuana in a hotel room. And somebody called and complained, and we were the agency that went ahead and responded. Because somebody complained and it's illegal in our state. We've uncovered domestic violence cases. We've uncovered human trafficking cases. All these much larger societal problems because we're worried about those small things. And when we start forgetting about those small things, that's when we get in trouble. I worked with an officer who for years, came from a larger agency, from another state, and he would complain when we would send officers to calls that he didn't consider were important enough. And he would say to me, well, we never sent officers to calls like that in X, Y, or Z where we were at. We never sent cops to this call or that type of call. And I said, why did you leave where you were at? And he says, oh my gosh, the schools were horrible. The town was horrible, blah, 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 graffiti. And he goes on. And I looked at him and I go, you want to know why? Because you guys quit worrying about those little things, those quality of life issues that people really complain about. You started ignoring them. That's one of the things we're really proud about is we still answer those small calls when people call. We don't tell them, do it online. We try to go answer those. If it's a criminal call, we're going to go answer it. If, really what we do in law enforcement is solve people's problems. Probably 90% of what we do, 95%, has nothing to do with the criminal code. That's why rarely I say law enforcement. I always talk about policing, because it's a little bit different. And our job when we go to a call is this. I'm not going to tell you this isn't a police issue, 10-8, because the person on the shift behind me is getting called back to that house. When I get there, it may not be a police issue, but I'm going to provide you the resources you need to fix your problem. I'm going to direct you to the resources you need. It's why we started our CIT team, our crisis intervention team. And we have a mental health professional that is on that team. And they follow up with people. They answer these crisis calls. They go back, they give them the resources they need to get the mental health treatment that they need. And they follow up with them and, hey, are you following up on your treatment? Are you getting your meds? Are you doing those things? And what that does is it reduces the calls for our patrol officers to keep responding to those. It reduces those interactions that may end up turning volatile that maybe didn't need to turn volatile.
Right. Speaking of the things escalating unnecessarily, there are my brother-in-law's in Berkeley Police Department, has been for 20 plus years, has worked his way up, and I mean, they got defunded by 50% in spite of having like an incredible record. There were all kinds of riots there over the last 10, 15 years where the police department is literally, you have police officers standing in front of the police department trying to stop people from destroying it. But the policies in place have really hampered their ability to effectively police, right? For instance, one in particular, my brother-in-law is standing in front during a riot. He's standing in front of the police department. They're trying to save buildings because people were running cars directly through buildings into Walgreens. People were getting assaulted left and right. I mean, older residents of Berkeley, multiple stories of people coming downstairs like, hey, trying to calm down. Hey, guys, you got to stop doing. They're looting a store, and then they just get assaulted. They get jumped. 10 guys beat the hell out of him from an inch of death, rob him, the whole thing, right? So my brother-in-law is standing there with a line of police officers in front of the Berkeley Police Department, and they had put in policies to, protect the citizens so that police officers couldn't physically even touch someone unless they were actively arresting them. So here they're standing there trying to protect their police department, and people are walking up to them, like huge dudes and crazy people in masks, inches away from their face, screaming at them. Of course, the cell phone filming the whole thing. He's yelling at them to back up. He can't push him. He can't do anything because he's not, and they're screaming, "Are you going to arrest me?" What? And it's just hearing him recount the experience makes the hairs on the back of my neck go up. Because it's kind of like, how are you going to not only police and protect the city and community? How are you expected to protect yourself as an officer with this policy? Now, I know that's not a policy, obviously, in Meridian or Idaho, but are there policies that you're worried about that are like being discussed? Are there things coming up that you're kind of like, this better not go because it's a slippery slope? Are there things like that? Or do you feel like the legislators in general are doing a reasonable job and on the side of law enforcement and common sense?
Yeah, I think for the most part in this area, we're pretty fortunate, but there are things certainly that make us nervous, make us question what our legislators are, who they're actually listening to. One was we tried to get a mandatory minimum sentencing bill for fentanyl last session, and we got so much pushback. It was crazy to me that we continue to watch kids and our brothers, sisters, moms, dads die of fentanyl overdoses, yet we don't think that's important enough that if you're a trafficker in fentanyl that you should mandatorily have a prison sentence. And we have people who don't come to this state to deliver heroin because of our mandatory minimums on heroin. We literally have them on wiretap saying, I'm not coming to Idaho because we had one guy out of Utah who literally said, I'm not coming back to Idaho. I did a mandatory minimum there. So they were going down there and picking up the heroin and then bringing it, Idahoans were, and bringing it back here and selling it. And we get this crazy argument that, well, what are we going to do with the one-time drug trafficker? Nobody is a one-time drug trafficker. That is such a misnomer. We're not arresting users. We're not asking to send users to prison. You can't find people in our prison system that are there for possession of marijuana or even possession of methamphetamine or heroin. They may be there that may be what they got sentenced on, but when you see what their charges were reduced from, they're traffickers. There's other crimes around it. That's why they're sitting in prison. And this whole misnomer that our jails and our prisons are full of drug users has been proven wrong time and time again to our legislature, yet some of them still take the anecdotal evidence and say, oh, no, that's absolutely true. You're tugging at my heartstrings. And we'll come back to them, show them the actual case, and then they're like, oh, that wasn't true. Yeah, that wasn't true. We're not putting drug addicts in jail. We're putting drug traffickers in jail. We're sending drug dealers to jail. we are sending people to jail that are killing your kids. And we've got to get that straight with our legislature. That's one of the things that we worry about. We try to soften the idea of this war on drugs. And what we've done since we've done that is we've created a much more drug use, much harsher drugs coming into our communities. The other thing that certainly we worried about after George Floyd was you have people who are pushing policies that know nothing about policing. They wanted to do away with carotid neck restraints, even though I can take several studies and show you how safe they are. You do jujitsu. How many people have you seen die in your jujitsu gym after getting choked unconscious?
Yeah, 0.
Exactly. There are so many other things that are surrounding the occurrence when somebody dies after a struggle with police. It could have been a foot pursuit, and they're going to die from that because of the drugs in their system and all of these things. It's not because of the neck restraint. The neck restraint has proven to be safer than any other type of use of force. It's not only safer on your suspects, but it's safer on your officers. They're less likely on both ends to get injured. And there's studies out there that show that. Yet people come up with these crazy things, and we don't always help ourselves because people call it a chokehold. It is not a chokehold, right? It cuts off the blood circulation and knocks someone unconscious. I've been several times.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. And they used to call me the sleeper when I was a white belt.
And it's harmless. It's harmless.
Well, I did end up like this, so
there is that. But those types of things and people that don't understand how police use of force actually works. And there are people who literally, they just want to generate controversy, right? I don't get to say, oh, you know what? The police, this was a very tragic situation. The police were involved in it, but hey, they did things right. That's not what they're going to say. That's not what they're going to write in their articles. It's okay for you to go ahead and try to beat up a police officer, but when he takes control of you or it turns into a fight, we're going to criticize the police officer for defending themselves. For me, I really look at our use of force. I try and emphasize so much, the idea of jiu-jitsu, of judo, those things are so valuable to police officers because really what our public expects us to do is to be able to control people. And those are two of the ways that you really can control people with very little effort or injury to somebody else, as opposed to punching people. I always tell them they don't want you to punch people into submission. They want you to control somebody and get them into custody. And that is the expectation of the public. And if that is the case, then we should be training to that level. Now, I go back and I can go off on a training tangent here, but if you want to train to that level and you want to make it mandatory for police officers, you better triple your police departments because you expect our officers to be an expert in every single thing, mental health, being able to identify whether you're on drugs or whether you are suffering from a mental illness, whether be an expert in hand-to-hand combat, be an expert in shooting, be an expert in all these different things. They should be training probably at least 1 week out of every single month in all of those
disciplines,
those skill sets, those disciplines. And because this is really a hard job. And I don't think people realize just how hard of a job it is because you think about it, if you come out, you're 22, 23 years old and you become a police officer and you go to a call and it's a juvenile beyond control, right? Kid that's just out of control. Parents can't control them. And you get there and the parents expect you to have these magical abilities to be able to explain to them how they can parent better, explain to the child how to be a better child, how to do all these things. You don't even have kids, right? You may not even be married. You've never had to deal with kids before, but they expect you to be that expert in that area. And the next call you go to maybe is a fight down at the local bar. And you walk in there and everybody expects you to walk in there like your Walker Texas Ranger, be able to just take everybody into custody and it's looks wonderful just like it does on the big screen. And then the next call you go to is a mental health call and they expect you to be the mental health expert and to be able to talk this person into handcuffs and do all these great and wonderful things. And here you are, 23 years old, and you've had maybe a year's worth of training before you've been put out on the street by yourself.
Right. I was speaking with Officer Gomez just a couple days ago. Incredible conversation. We were talking about it was wild. Right. The second one or the first one? Because I just did a second one with him.
First one, probably.
Yeah, the second one was even better, and we have several more lined up. Incredible depth of knowledge, and his capacity to bridge the gaps with people, and I think specifically with children and parents is really remarkable. And I worked with kids and parents in education a lot, but seeing his ability to help people, or at least articulate why the actions of parents in general are leading. He's like, look, I'm not about victim blaming, but I'll tell you what, your kid ran away. I'll go find him. But why isn't the kid going to run away again? Right. And they're like, well, you tell him not to or something. He's like, that doesn't matter. He's like, you're a train wreck. Look, he's like, look at your house. Look at and again, I'm putting words in his mouth, but the idea is that the living situation is so intolerable and bonkers, which some are, right? Like, that's not to say everybody, like, my house is crazy. I got 3 boys. Yeah, it gets crazy. Kids aren't running away. Like, I understand raising a family is messy, right? But it doesn't mean that, there's rampant physical abuse or sexual abuse. Like, there are things that will make children run away. And again, looking at it and having him come into the situation and say, like, hey, look, this is all I can do. I can help, like you were talking about, giving resources. I can help you get classes. I can help you, work through with counselors. I can help you get all of these things, but I can't, like, I don't have a magic wand. Like, I can't make your kids stay here. I can't make you guys get along better. I just can't do these things. Like, you're ultimately limited watching these, human dramas play out in front of you and everyone expecting you to fix it.
Yeah. And I've got to give a plug to the bridge. It just opened in Ada County, and that is exactly what it is designed for. So forever, the thought process in policing was, you're dealing with a kid who's a little bit out of control. I don't know if we really have a crime here. I don't know. And how many times an officer would tell a parent, well, unless we get them in the system, they're not going to get any help. Well, what we found is when you get that kid in the system, they're more than likely to go back in the system, the criminal justice system. So what the bridge does is it's a resource center. And if we have that kid who he's running away, she's running away, they're a juvenile beyond control, we refer them to the bridge. And the parents have to agree to be involved in this process. And really what they do is they give parents, as much as they do kids, those parenting abilities. They teach them how to be parents. They give them evaluations and for them and for the kids, and they evaluate, how do you think your kid, how bad do you think your kid is? Oh, my kid's horrible. They're clear up here when they do their evaluation. And the kid, of course, he's minimizing it. She's minimizing it. And you realize it's somewhere in the middle. So let's sit down and let's have these conversations. Let's send you to some parenting classes. Let's send your child to some classes on developing coping mechanisms and doing those things. And so far, they're seeing some really good success stories come out of there. And I think that's where we need to get better and where we are learning. And I think where, as policing, we've been very progressive, especially in this valley, of figuring that out, that we don't want kids in the system. If I can keep kids out of the system, I'm going to keep them out of the system. If I can keep adults out of the system and make sure they're going to be productive adult, that's what I want. I want to have productive citizens here. Right. And putting them in, incarcerating them for certain things isn't always going to get them the help that they need. Now, sometimes by the time they're an adult, if they're caught up in drugs or whatever, that is the wake-up call, right? It is sometimes going to jail. That is your wake-up call. But again, we can do that in a way that is compassionate, a way that is empathetic, a way that can actually change somebody's view of law enforcement, even though they've had a negative view before. I got an amazing letter from a lady about a year ago, maybe a little longer, on one of our officers. Her son was involved in a DUI crash, African-American young man. Our officer gets there. The kid is out of control, just horrible to our officer. Our officer is calm the whole time. He's an adult. I say kid, but everyone's a kid to me. Um, and our officer just does a phenomenal job. Runs him through all the DUI stuff, is arresting him for DUI, gives him when he's done with all his DUI stuff, gives him a Gatorade to drink, takes him to the jail. On their way into booking, he says, "Is there somebody that you need to call?" Blah blah blah. Yeah, I'd like if you'd call my mom. The officer uses his phone, calls the guy's mom, and then puts the kid on the phone. Kid talks to her, explains what's going on. And the letter we get back is, hey, this kid, we adopted him. He's a refugee, is dealing with some mental health issues, has had very negative experiences with law enforcement. But holy cow, his view of policing has changed just from that one contact. And how your officer being empathetic and being compassionate towards him, and it didn't take any effort. It didn't take any effort. All he had to do was treat this young man like a person. And it changed his view. And sometimes that's the conversation we have to have with some people that look at us with a little bit of a jaundiced eye, and they've had bad experiences with us. And I'll give you another anecdote with another one of our officers. Went to a call, car burglary, starts talking to the guy, getting the information, and the guy goes off on him. "You're not going to do anything. You're not going to help me," because this guy had been arrested several times for a variety of things. And our officer goes, "Stop. You don't know me. You've never interacted with me, have you?" And the guy's like, "No." He goes, "Let me prove to you that I'm going to take this serious and I'm going to treat you appropriately." And he does, and he recovers the guy, and the guy recovers his property, and the guy couldn't believe it, right? Sometimes we have to earn their trust, and that's where it is. It's no different than a leadership position. We have to earn our people's trust. It's not up to them to earn our trust. As a leader, you've got to go out and you've got to earn their trust. And then that relationship starts to build.
You did some time as an undercover agent, correct? When you were going through that and reflecting on the career you've had before and after and during, when you're living the job, right? Your hair's long, you got earrings, you look a mess. I presume you looked like a mess. I didn't see
My
it.
wife will say yes.
Okay. What was do you look back on it, or were you thinking at the time, like, was this worth it? Is this worth it? Right? Like, you're looking at yourself in the mirror, like, first off, as somebody who talks to people on a podcast, like, this is all I got to do. Like, and you see me at Albertsons, I look the exact, like, it doesn't cost me anything to do my job. When I was an SAT tutor, I would shave and I would put on a shirt and slacks. Okay. It didn't cost me anything aside from looking a little bit better than I'm, inclined to look. But when your job costs you down to who you are in the mirror, do you reflect on your time being undercover and your time after and feel like it was worth it because your job costs you so much?
It was absolutely worth it. I will say that. And again,
and this is not a retirement speech. I'm like, it's one of those things. It's so significant.
It absolutely was worth it. And it was worth it it's one of the reasons, again, I am so anti-drug, because almost every crime we deal with has some type of drug nexus to it or some type of addiction nexus to it. Doesn't matter what the crime is, whether it's robbery, burglary, all these things are tied to people's drug addictions and, homicides, all those things. Every human has a worth, and we need to remember that. And one of the things I was very fortunate of, I've seen people who've worked undercover and have gone too far, right? And have really got way too far into the role. And it's not only cost them their families and their careers. It's cost them everything. You always need to make sure you have somebody who will ground you. Somebody who grounds you. And I was very fortunate in my wife would ground me, always still does. But I also had a brother who was in law enforcement and who was older. And it's kind of the reason I went the law enforcement, is a lot of the reason I went the law enforcement route. But he was always quick to ground me. and make sure that I had my head on straight. I worked with a guy from the Idaho State Police, and he's still there, Lieutenant Jack Catlin. And that was a guy who was ready and willing to line me out. I was a pretty darn good undercover. Actually, I was good at what I did. But Jack made sure I was humbled many times, right? Other people, if you're the undercover and they're the case officer, you may do things that are a little bit risky, and they let it go because, oh, you're a good undercover. Jack wasn't that way. I remember doing a drug deal, and we were supposed to do it in a parking lot. I thought I was being pretty sharp, but we were going to see if this guy could produce more than we'd asked for. And so we got there, and it was supposed to be an ounce of meth, and I said, well, I got enough for a quarter pound. Can you get me a quarter pound? And the guy's like, yeah, but we got to go back to my house. You never go to the suspect's house like that. You shouldn't, especially when you have a deal set up in a particular location. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I'm thinking I'm being pretty sharp because I make him take the keys out of his car because he had come with some other guys and they had walked into the store or the parking lot we were in. So I said, grab your keys out of the car. And we drive and we go, and I make the deal, and I'm like, the cat's meow, man. Look what I did. I got us this quarter pound when we were only supposed to get an ounce. And Jack Catlin jumps right in the middle of me and starts screaming at me. And he says, I don't know who you think you are or how big of a hot shot you think you are, but I'm going to tell you something right now. You ever do that again, and I will kick your ass myself. He said, I am not going to your house to tell your wife that you're dead because you're so goddamn cool. And I was like, whoa. And from that moment on, I had more respect for that guy than probably any officer that I've worked with, because he put me in my place, reminded me of what is truly important, my family, going home to my family, and that, getting drugs off the street is extremely important, but it is not worth everything that you have.
Man, I can't imagine. I guarantee you, were I in that situation as a younger man, I would have made worse decisions than you. That's like, gosh, man, the judgment you have to have in decision making seems bonkers. One more question I have for you specifically, and again, I know we talked about a lot of things. You mentioned being progressive. There's a debate kind of going on in the area about how to respond to what we assume is ever-increasing law enforcement need. Okay? Because the area is growing so much, there are certain areas that are saying, okay, let's get ahead of it. Before we need officers, let's get officers trained. Let's take care of this. And there are other areas that are saying, hey, we live in a reasonably safe place, beautiful area, right? Great spot to be, lower instances of crime. Let's not burden the taxpayer, which I greatly appreciate, right? Let's not burden the taxpayer with additional, kind of proactive costs. Let's just wait until we actually need it. Let's be fiscally responsible. I respect both positions. Obviously one is really trying to get ahead of it and maintain a safe environment, which everybody wants. And the other obviously wants a safe environment, but also wants to very much do honor and service to the people earning money and paying taxes for this stuff. What has Meridian done? What's the position they've taken? Were they proactive and kind of pushing the envelope with, okay, I know we may not absolutely need this right now, but it's the right thing to do to get ahead of this? Or were they more of, hey, let's not push this too hard before it's needed?
Yeah. So one thing Meridian has always been is fiscally conservative. When we build something, we pay for it. We've never had to go out and do bonds. They've been very good at saving money and paying for things as we go. And when it's come to officers, they have been very, very progressive in that if we need more officers, we're going to hire more officers. There was one year we went to budget and we said, this is how many officers we have, because we're very cognizant as well that there are other needs in the city. Right. We can't take all the money from everybody else. Right. And our council said, well, do you need more? And we were like, well, yeah, we'd like to have 5 more. And they were like, we're going to put 5 more in. And one of the things that has helped us really is our citizens have reached out to our council and our mayor and said, we need more officers. We want more officers. There was one year where literally the development community reached out, and our council members had said they had never had that happen before, and said, whatever police needs, you need to get that for them this year. And so our city has been very, very progressive on trying to hire officers. We just built a North Station in Northwest Meridian, north of Owyhee High School, and it is literally another police station. It's not a little report writing room in a mall. It is a police station. It will be a full functioning police station by the time, over the next few years, and as we're able to continue to staff it and do all those things. It will literally be somewhere where you would go just like you would to our headquarters. And so that's how progressive they have been. The other thing that they've been really good at is when other agencies, when times get tight, they usually cut the training budget. It's always the first thing to go in an organization. And we've had those conversations with our council members and our mayors and said, here's what you're risking if you cut your training. These are the lawsuits you can face. And they're going to cost you a lot more, not just in money, but also in your political capital, your social capital with your community. And so our city has said, no, we're not cutting your training budget. We're going to continue to fund your training budget as well. And so I think, though, you have to be having those conversations with your cities up front, and be willing to explain to them why you do the things that you do, and what things look like. One of the things I did is I took a couple of videos of people just being horribly, just so rude and ignorant to our officers on a couple of calls, and took them to a council member and says, here you go, take a look at these videos. And our officers were as calm as could be, as polite as could be. And the council member was like, you're kidding me. And I said, no. And that right there is the difference between being a fireman and being a policeman. Those are the types of interactions. And luckily in this area, they're not nearly as common as other areas, but we still get them. We still have those people who literally will come up and just try to egg an officer into a confrontation. And we talk about it. We are constantly beating that drum to our officers, right? That people have a right to film you. They have a right to be there. As long as they're not causing a safety issue, they have that right. So let's remember that, and don't get yourself in trouble. Our job's to try to get you to retirement. Don't make a split-second decision because somebody pressed that button. And they can say a lot of things that are really bad to press your buttons. But remember, it's the uniform they're screaming at, not you personally. They call them First Amendment auditors, and they come in and they'll just be filming in your building, right? They have a right to do that. You can ask them why they're there. You can do all those things, but be polite, be kind. We had one come in, talk to one of our officers, and as he's doing his interaction with our officer, he says, "Oh, well, I heard your chief's a judo guy, and I'd like to talk to him about use of force." And our guy's like, "Oh, okay, well, give me your name and number, and I'll see if he'll call you." So I called the guy. He came in, we had a long discussion on use of force, and he put it on he was out of Arizona, and he put it on his little page, and I'm like, I'll talk to anybody. It doesn't matter what group they're from. We'll sit down, we'll have that conversation. And I think you got to be willing to have those conversations with people and dispel some of their myths as well. And our officers have been really, really good about that. I think right now in law enforcement, as crazy as it is, we're in a really good place as leaders if we want to make some of the positive changes. When all the things came out about George Floyd and police reform and all of these things, I had a former council member who's now in the legislature said, "Are you going to leave as soon as you get your points and you can retire?" And I said, "No." And he goes, why? With all this hate and discontent directed towards law enforcement. I said, because what better time to be a law enforcement leader and to be able to be that calming agent in that storm when we do need to reform some things. There's no doubt about it. We need to do some things better. So why not be in the forefront of doing that and doing it ahead of some politician coming in who knows nothing about your job and having them dictate to you how you're going to police, which has happened in other parts of the country. Let's make sure that we're doing things right. Let's get ahead of it. Let's be those progressive police departments. And when you say progressive, it's not in the negative connotation that people use, right? It means we're moving forward. We're doing better. We're getting better at what we do. And we can always be better at what we do. We can't continue to have riots and these things happen every few years and then go, but we've done nothing wrong. No, there are reasons. I am a firm believer that those things are the tipping points, right? If George Floyd had happened 10 years ago, probably wouldn't have had the same reaction. But that community had many, many, many negative interactions with their police agency over the years. That was just the tipping point.
Right.
That was the final straw. And I think you see that in a lot of communities. The case in Ferguson. The story was completely debunked of what actually occurred there. Completely debunked. And the autopsies proved it. Even the independent autopsies and the autopsy that the family did on Michael Brown proved that the story his friend had said was completely false. The DNA in the police car and on the police officer completely debunked it. But what they did find when they went and did that investigation was that the Ferguson Police Department had built up a very antagonistic relationship with that community. This was just the tipping point because people were willing to believe that initial story because of their perceptions and their interactions with that police department over the years.
Man, that's it's so unfortunate. Chief, I've had you here for a long time.
Absolutely.
We've talked about a lot of things. I'm very aware that you're on duty. Is there anything you'd like to say that we've missed?
The only thing I will say is this. When you interact with a police officer, remember to give them a little bit of grace because we talked about it, but they are human beings. They are moms. They are dads, brothers, sisters. The things that you want in your community and for your kids are the exact same things those police officers want for their kids and for their community. They want their kids to be safe. They want their families to be able to go out at night and feel safe and to do all those things that families do, go to a park and not worry about dealing with gangs and dealing with graffiti and drug paraphernalia laying around. They want their kids to go to good schools. They want their kids to go to good churches. Everything that you're wanting for your kids is exactly what they want. And when they approach you, they're not doing it because they want to be antagonistic. They're not doing it because they don't want to be there. They're doing it because society has asked us to do a job. They have asked us, and it's a calling for most of us that get into this career, they have asked us to truly be that thin blue line between a functioning society and chaos. And that's why they're there. That's why the vast majority of police officers are there. They want to serve the community. There's nothing better than having somebody wave to you with all their fingers in this community. And it's funny because we get officers that come from other places and they're like, man, people are really nice to us here. We're like, it's very intentional. That's why when we tell you how important our relationship is with our community, we mean it. We absolutely mean that. And we want to hold on to that. It's kind of a special little place that we have here in this valley and in Idaho with our community and our law enforcement. And we've got to hold on to that. And we've got to be very intentional about holding on to that.
Man, God bless you, man. I so appreciate it. I know I don't live in Meridian, but I appreciate what you do to keep the surrounding areas safe. I mean, I'm driving my boy to the Axiom Sports Complex tonight to go do basketball. Like, we live in this area, right? There's no longer just like one city. I don't even live in Eagle. I live in unincorporated Ada County, right? But just going through Meridian, it's wonderful to know that you're there doing what you can.
Well, and that is one other thing I do have to point out, because it is something that is very, very unique to this area. And that is the relationship between the law enforcement agencies in this area. We all respect each other and we help each other out. And we have this conversation. Sheriff Clifford and I have had this conversation. People don't care what color uniform shows up. They want a police officer. They want to show up and take care of whatever the issue is. Right. And that issue, that relationship has been very unique to Ada County for sure. And now it's starting to spread from Ada County into our relationships with the Canyon County agencies in Nampa. And you're going to have Chief Ingram on here later. And him and I, we have a phenomenal relationship. Nampa and Meridian, we run our joint police academy together. We understand the importance. And I always tell people, I want the best trained officers in every community in Idaho, because my family lives in different parts of Idaho. My family's traveling through different parts of Idaho. I want, when they get stopped by a police officer, to know they are extremely well trained and they are going to be treated very well by that police officer. And if we can do that, we'll continue to hold on to that special little place that we call Idaho for sure.
It's beautiful. Well, thank you for what you do for the community. Thank you to the department. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to the people today, and hopefully first to many.
Yeah, thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by MTU Studios. If you're looking to start a podcast or need content for your business or personal use, content of any type, please reach out to MTU Studios. MTUstudios.com. We'd love to help.